Hello and welcome back to the series of lectures on floriculture. Today we will be talking about an ornamental plant which has tremendous commercial usage almost everywhere, temperate, tropical, alpine, subalpine areas of the world. The plant, popularly known as a rosy plant, is the one wherein a roughly estimated 10,000 different types have so far been identified. These show variation in color, variation in size, variation in pattern of growth, variation in habit, as well as the variation in habitat, that is the conditions in which they grow and survive. The roses have many different usages, amongst them the ornamental usage, that is wherein the flower, as you can see in a bed, are grown simply for the flowers, is actually used for improving the ornamental value of a particular location, or wherein the aroma or the fragrance that the rose or its foliage yields is used for the manufacture and synthesis of certain perfumery products. It has been seen that almost anywhere in an ornamental area or in any commercial ornamental park, these roses create and constitute one of the major segments of that. And in these segments, not only one but many different types of roses are cultivated together or are altered in such a pattern wherein on the basis of color, on the basis of size, on the basis of developmental pattern, we can actually see different types and different roses. As far as the history of the rose is concerned, there are two different claims. One of the claims is that it originated somewhere in Mediterranean region. They claim that in Mediterranean region, it was accidentally discovered way back around 500 BC by plant explorers, and they found that the color as well as the aroma that the flower of the rose yields is more useful than any other natural source of such colors and aromas. Second claim is that in the Fertile Crescent, that is the area where the domestication of plants, commercial cultivation of the plants was initiated, is the area where the rose as an ornamental plant originated. This claim is authentic on the basis of documentary evidences as well as archaeological evidences. In Persian region, especially Iran and Iraq, the age of the rose is claimed to be around 1000 BC, that is roughly estimated 3000 years old. And it is claimed that the rose, once it was discovered, ordinarily was seen only in one color, that is red. And it was said that that red colored rose was claimed to be a sign of the blood that is lost by the plant explorers. It is said that these Persian people brought these plants from the wild habitats and tried to cultivate it at their home or in the vicinity of their homes as a decorative or as an ornamental plant. It was seen that their concept was simply and purely to cultivate this on the basis of the color as well as the aroma the flower yielded or the rose yielded. However, it is said that once the people came to this particular portion of Central Asia via the Silk Route, that is the route that was linking China with Central Asia and subsequently with Mediterranean, was actually used by the traders who were actually coming from Europe to Asia, from Asia to Europe, to simply trade in other productive things. It is said that during their trade, they took with them the roses, either as a flowering plant or simply as a flower, and tried to introduce it to the Mediterranean people. In Mediterranean area, it was seen that in addition to its ornamental value, an aroma that was yielded not only by the foliage but by the flowers was very useful in using that as a material to overcome whatever aromatic deficiencies were seen in the areas. It is said that perhaps Mediterranean region was the first area in the world where the commercial cultivation as well as domestication of the roses was carried out. From Mediterranean, the roses subsequently were introduced into America and also into Asia as a commercially cultivated and productive crop. However, Despite repeated efforts, so far only 4 distinct types of roses have been categorized and identified on the basis of their morphological as well as productive features. As I already mentioned that 10,000 roses are known, but amongst them only 4 have been accepted as commercially productive roses of the world. These are number 1, which is referred to as Rosa indica, or commonly referred to as Indian white rose. This rose is considered to be the first rose that was domesticated in India as an ornamental plant. This rose has 2 properties. One, its flower, even though only white in color mainly, has been seen to develop very different variants in terms of color as well as size of the flower, but also it has developed a protocol wherein its flowers have become aromatically very useful. That is, they can release an aroma that is on the basis of essential oil, which is useful in the manufacture of perfumes. Second important rose is the Rosa centifolia, commonly referred to as cabbage rose. This cabbage rose is considered to be one of the most important rose of the world, primarily on the basis of not only the variation in size, but also the different variations in the colors. It has been seen that the size of the roses sometimes is as small as comparable to a smallest possible herbaceous flower, and sometimes as large as compared to the flat astraceous roses. Furthermore, it has been seen that this centifolia is a rose which has much better adaptability to low altitudes, to high altitudes, to temperate conditions as well as to tropical conditions, wherein it can produce and sustain whatever conditions it has been adapted or transplanted into. The third important rose that has been identified is referred to as Rosa chinensis, that is commonly known as Chinese rose. This rose is actually considered to be a source of what is referred to as gulkand, a commercial product used for manufacture of certain important medicine as well as certain consumable products. This Chinese rose is essentially a dominant rose of almost all the countries of Asia, wherein they try to cultivate it not only as an ornamental plant but also as a source of commercial product, that is gulkand. Fourth important rose that is commonly cultivated in almost all parts of the world is known as Rosa damascena. This is also known as perfume rose or damask rose. The reason for this is that the aroma of this rose is so wonderful that it is considered to be the backbone of almost all the perfumery industries of the world, wherein the flower, the foliage and sometimes even the smaller branchlets of the plant have been used for the extraction of the perfumery product. It has been seen that in all the 4 cases, their domestication, their cultivation as well as their production has been able to convert a wild plant, a plant which was ordinarily available in almost any habitat or under any habit conditions, has become one of the most widely domesticated and commercially cultivated plant. Furthermore, the common practice of the cultivation of roses is that one has to either first identify the conditions or the types of equidistant conditions in which it can grow, and secondly, what type of growth pattern it has. That is, if the plant grows as a widely branched shrubby individual, it is ornamentally grown simply in a rosary or a rose bed. However, in case the plant has a potential to grow as a creeper or a climber, in those cases a suitable developmental pattern or a growth practice has been achieved so that this can be grown as a creeping ornamental on the walls or the peripheral surfaces of home, as you can see. The difference between these 2 roses, that is one which is grown in beds, second which is grown as a creeping rose or climbing rose, is primarily on the basis of the structural pattern as well as the developmental pattern of the plant. In case the main axis or the stem or the branches and branchlets have a potential to sustain the weight and size of the roses, it is usually seen to be cultivated as a dwarf rose individual or a rose plant. However, In case the main axis or the branchlets or the branches are weaker and are not able to sustain the size as well as the number of flowers on them, in that case one has to provide them a support so that they can act or grow as climbing roses. As you can see, the erect roses and climbing roses grown under two different conditions. It has been seen that in both these two types of roses, the basic requirement is of a type of a soil, number one, and number two, what type of maintenance or what type of the cultivation practices should be followed throughout the season. In both cases, whether climbing or creeping rose we are talking of or an erect rose we are talking of, the basic habit is of a perennial individual. That means it can grow for as long as we desire or as long as we want, provided the productive potential as well as the quality of the roses remains consistently same. Furthermore, the conditions in which it can be grown or cultivated commercially or ornamentally essentially depend upon the type of soil as well as the type of the environment in which we grow it. One of the most important requirements of the plant is that it prefers to be grown under sunny conditions, irrespective of the altitude at which we grow it. The reason for this is that roses tend to prefer to remain continuously exposed to sunny conditions, as you can see, so that the flowers, once they sprout, actually are radiating enormous light and colors from its surface so that its ornamental value improves. Brighter the color, brighter is the ornamentation. Brighter the light, brighter is the ornamentation. That means whenever we grow it under sunny conditions, whatever color the flower has, that color becomes more dominant if the sunny conditions are prevalent. However, in case we grow it under shady conditions, in those cases, even though the number of flowers may remain same, as you can see here in shady conditions, the number of flowers may remain same, their size may remain same, but the color that these roses show and the ornamental value that these roses ordinarily have gets partially or sometimes completely depleted. Reason for this is that in shady conditions, the roses are not able to reflect whatever color they have. Furthermore, once the rose actually wants light, it tends to bend away from the normal axis of the plant, and we see sometimes branches even getting bent towards the basal portion of the plant. That means if we have a creeping rose or climbing rose grown on a wall and that wall is on the shady surface, automatically the productive potential, ornamental quality as well as the durability of these roses gets depleted. Second important condition is that when the flower is in the vegetative phase, that means when the rosy plant is in vegetative phase, it needs a reasonable irrigation so that the growth pattern, that is the vegetation pattern, branching pattern as well as development of buds is regularized. However, when it reaches the flowering phase, at that phase one has to monitor irrigation till the flowers show signs of senescence. That means wherein the rose shows the color change or color variation, where the color fades away as well as some of the petals tend to drop out from the flower. At that level, one has to simply stop irrigation so that the flowers actually get senesced completely and fresher flowers or fresher roses start to develop. In highly developed gardens or highly maintained gardens, we see that the same branch of the plant of rose or same rosy plant as a whole can produce not once, sometimes twice and sometimes even 3 times the flowers per season. This is primarily because whatever branch has produced flowers and the flower senescence has completed, we tend to usually see that as soon as petals drop out, the next branch or a same branch tends to produce another flower. In this case, an achievement has been made by horticulturists wherein they find that as soon as the flower senescence is complete, if that branch as a whole or the branchlet of that plant has been cut off, the next branch or next branchlet tends to produce a bud which in turn will sprout and produce a flower. That way, it means that the same rosy plant can produce flowers not once but sometimes twice, sometimes thrice on the same in the same bed. It automatically means if a rosary section is created in a garden, as you can see here, a rosary section created in that garden, you will find that the flowering of this particular section remains consistently throughout the season. automatically the ornamental value not only of the section but also of the plant improves. However, it has also been seen that in case the productive potential of the rosy plant or the color as well as size variation has been seen, the addition of suitable fertilizers, either organic or inorganic, as well as pattern of irrigation, if regularized and maintained, has helped to actually improve productive potential of these roses as well as of that particular bed. In present concept, the rose cultivation as well as rose production has been subdivided into two sections. One, wherein a rose is cultivated purely and commercially for ornamental purposes, and one where the rose is cultivated purely for extraction of the perfume products. The difference herein lies the pattern of plantation as well as the pattern of maintenance. If a rose is cultivated for ornamental purposes, usually one sees a suitable distance between two adjacent plants as well as the proper creation of a bed in which they can be able to produce roses almost throughout the season. As you can see, the distance between two adjacent plants as well as the pattern of plantation. However, if the rose is cultivated primarily for the extraction of the perfume, in that case the basic plantation pattern is not ornamentally suitable but commercially productively suitable. That is, wherein row plantation at shorter distance and wherein the plantation pattern is mainly concerned with the productive potential, that is number of roses planted produced by a per plant as well as the number of petals as well as the foliage produced by this plant. You can see that once we compare the ornamental roses with perfumery roses, we find that the density pattern also adheres or sometimes even abhors the commercial potential of these two. Furthermore, once we have to harvest a rose for the extraction of the perfumes, at that stage tendency is that once the ornamental value of the rose is higher, we tend to cut it off for the perfumery products at that stage. That means the ornamental value of the rose immediately gets transformed into a commercial value, thereby cutting the roses so that the flower production potential as well as the ornamental quality of that plant gets depleted. On this basis, it has been seen that people who try to cultivate roses commercially for two different purposes, that is A section for ornamental, B for perfumery extraction, they try to create two subsections either within the same lawn or sometimes within the same bed, so that the first portion, that is the portion which is usually visible to almost everyone, that is for ornamental roses, and that section which is partially seen or not seen at all is cultivated wherein only those roses are cultivated which are used for the extraction of the perfumery products. It has been seen that in these two cases the size of the flower has also been partially or sometimes even fully modified. For ornamental roses, preference has been seen to be for those roses where the size of the flower is suitable in terms of commercial storage as an ornamental plant for trade, as well as in terms of decorating certain items at home, as well as in certain public unions or public parks. However, when we talk about an aromatic rose, that is where the aroma is extracted in the form of an essential oil, in those cases preference always is for the variation in number, not only in size. That means they would try to prefer a rosy plant where the number of roses is much higher than the number of the roses in case of ornamental rose, as well as where the size is not directly related to the ornamental value. Furthermore, it has been seen that the productive potential of the rosary plants, irrespective of the type for which it is cultivated, has been able to be maintained by addition of certain specific nutrients. In case of ornamental roses, the most important manure that is useful has been seen to be the cow dung manure. Reason for this is that the soil condition as well as the soil sustainable condition has been seen to prove more effective in those cases than it is wherein we add inorganic fertilizers like NPK and urea. However, if we are trying to cultivate roses for extraction of perfumery products, in those cases it has been seen that use of inorganic nutrients, especially urea and NPK, has been seen to improve not only the quality of the perfumery product in those roses, but also it has been seen to improve the productive potential of that plant without actually affecting negatively the survival potential as well as the production of those plants. Further, it has been seen that if these two are added together, that means in one section we try to cultivate ornamentals and in second section we try to cultivate the commercially useful sources of the aromatic oil. In those cases, it has been seen that the same bed cannot sustain the two types of roses together, and under such conditions one has to actually separate these two sections by creating a sort of a barrier in between, which should be sometimes 1, sometimes 1.5 feet wide and so tall so that the seepage either of the nutrients or of the irrigation should not pass from one rose bed into another, or sometimes from one rosary into another rosary. As you can see, we have created barriers between two adjacent buds and between two adjacent rosaries so that these cannot seep into the adjacent beds. And furthermore, it has been seen that at the time of addition of nutrients, either in the form of cow dung manure in case of the ornamental roses or addition of NPK and urea in case of the perfumery roses, the essential requirement is to provide first of all irrigation at the time of providing fertilizers, as well as providing or facilitating the digging of these beds or these rosaries so that the nutrients continuously and thoroughly get mixed up with these. It means that the concept is that once we try to standardize the cultivation practice of an ornamental rose or a commercial rose, one should see that the habit as well as the habitat of those two types of roses is understood fully and the requirements of both these roses are understood. Furthermore, once a protocol is developed for commercial cultivation of an ornamental rose or commercial cultivation of a perfumery rose, one must also try to identify the habit of a plant as well as the habitat of a plant which is more suitable. As I already mentioned, we can cultivate it from alpine, subalpine, temperate to tropical areas, yet it has been seen that in each of these areas, be it temperate, be it alpine, be it subalpine, be it tropical, the rose has two specific requirements. That is, it needs to be monitored in terms of its developmental pattern as well as in terms of its productive potential, so that at the culmination of a growing season or at the time of a productive season, it has an ability to produce what it is grown for. For example, if you look at this particular bed, we will find almost every plant simultaneously producing flowers. That means the whole bed or that whole rosary has a significance of being ornamentally commercially useful. However, if we tend to create subsections within a rosary so that each section has a potential to produce flowers at a specific stage, in that case one has to maintain and monitor first those which flower in the early months of summer, second those which flower in the second part of summer, and those which produce flowers towards the end of the summer. That means we can create subsections within the same rosary or within the same garden wherein first part will produce flowers in the first part of summer, second in second part of summer, and third part in third part of summer, automatically making that rosary commercially useful as well as ornamentally wonderful, so that its usage as well as its commercial value is maintained and sustained throughout the growing season. Similarly, the same application is useful for those where we cultivate these for the extraction of aromatic substances. In these cases also, whatever rose is cultivated, that is a rose which actually gives us an aromatic substance, the cultivation practice should be followed either for whole season for the extraction of aromas, or B, wherein it is partially cultivated for its ornamental value and partially cultivated for its aromatic nature. That means we can harvest whatever plants, our plant or its products are giving us aromatic substance, harvest it at the end of the growth season, or we can be able to harvest some flowers for aromatic purposes and some flowers maintained for the ornamental purposes. It has been seen that this type of cultivation has been able to convert those areas where rosaries are created either as sections or as subsections of ornamental gardens, we are able to create these as productive sites for ornamentals as well as for aromatic plants. In both these conditions, one of the essential requirements is that one should try to protect the roses as well as the plants as a whole against the infections caused by certain insects and pests. Therein, the spray of insecticides and pesticides is made on these plants at a stage wherein the bud formation or the opening of these buds for the flowers has just been initiated. The reason for this is that if we try to spray these fungicides and insecticides on these open flowers, the durability, quality, color as well as the productive potential of the whole rose plant gets depleted. Therefore, the recommendation should be that whenever a spray is to be made of a fungicide or a pesticide, one must see that the stage is suitable, that is, it is in bud stage, as well as the pattern of spray is carried out in a way wherein only the affected parts, that is, wherein the flowers are to be produced or the foliage has been affected, should be sprayed, and the maintenance should be governed by a medium or by a method wherein not the productive part, that is the open flowers of the roses or those parts where the bud formation has reached an ultimate stage, is getting affected. This can help us to maintain and sustain the roses for as long as we desire. With these comments, we have actually talked about how, where and in which particular pattern rose domestication and rose cultivation has been standardized and what are the methods of its commercial production as well as maintenance under specific conditions. With these words, I conclude the first part of the lecture, that is where from, how the rose cultivation has been commercialized and domesticated, not only where it originated but also throughout the world. Thank you and bye.